Lee released several huffs as he waited for the group to come back inside. "What's happening?" Clementine asked. "I don't know, Sweet Pea," Lee said. He heard the front door of the RV opening. "What happened?" Katja asked. "Later," Kenny said. There was an audible talking from outside. It was followed by Wyatt, Ben, and a new boy entering the RV. They were finally followed by Bud. Lee breathed a sigh of relief. He thought Bud had gotten hurt or killed. However, Lee did notice that Carly and Lily weren't with them. The RV moved forward, much to Lee's surprise. "Wow, you weren't lying. You did have a couple of toddlers with you," the new boy said with a smile. "I'm Russell. What's your names?" Vin smiled and said, "This is Danielle. The baby on Lee's lap, that's Clementine. We usually shorten their names to Danny and Clem." Danielle made baby talk underneath the pacifier, while Clementine sent a smile to Russell. "You two are so cute," Russell said. "What happened out there?" Vince asked. Wyatt shook his head and said, "Lily snapped. She killed Carly. Then Bud killed her." "Oh no," Lee said. He looked over to Bud and said, "I better go talk with him." He got up and went over to Bud while carrying Clementine. He sat down next to his younger brother. He seemed to be crying himself. "Hey, Bud," Lee said, as he sat down and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Leave me alone. I just need time to myself," Bud said as he shrugged Lee off. Lee sighed and said, "Okay, Bud. I'm here if you ever want to talk." Bud nodded in response. "Bud's sad," Clementine said underneath the pacifier. Lee shushed her, and turned her around. "Bedtime, Sweet Pea," Lee said. He laid her body on his body and started to rub her back. It wasn't long until the toddler fell asleep. Lee sighed as he brought his head back to rest. It was a long day. They had lost the motor into a bunch of bandage. 2 in their own group members were dead, and they had a new boy in the group. Lee was still pondering everything that had happened when he heard Clementine moan. He then looked down to see the baby in his arms. He saw her look up at him. His world stopped. The pacifier fell out of her mouth. Her skin was decaying and torn, and her eyes were milky white. The second the walker, that was a toddler, lunged for him. "Oh shit, what happened?" Lee said, as he tried to keep her back. Somehow the toddler walker turned, showed an image of immense strength. He was unable to keep her back. She was about to bite down on his neck when suddenly everything went black. Lee jumped and he opened his eyes. He huffled as he looked around. He had noticed that everything seemed to be okay. It was a dream, a very bad dream. He looked to the toddler that he was holding. She was asleep and curled up in his lap with a pacifier in her mouth. "We got something up ahead," Kenny said, as from the front of the RV. Lee didn't want to put the toddler down by herself, but he would have to see what was going on. He got up and placed Clementine on the couch. It was enough to wake her up. She then yawned, which caused the pacifier to fall out of her mouth while she stretched. "Sorry, I have to go see what's up," Lee said. Clementine sat upright and she nodded. Lee then went back in front of the RV to see Kenny, Katja, and Duck. The boy had a huge grin on his face. "So cool! It's a train!" Duck said. "Well, at the moment, it was nothing more than a roadblock," Kenny said. If it still works, we could use it to get to Savannah," Lee said. "Hey, I know there is an idea. Beats driving around on this thing. I was crossing my fingers last night hoping it wouldn't break down," Kenny said. "Come on, let's go check it out. You, me, and I don't think Bud will be up for it." "Yeah, it's probably for the best," Lee said. He looked back at his younger brother, who was still resting. Lee went over to Clementine and said, "Stay in here. I'm going to check something out." "Okay," Clementine said. Lee went through the toddler's bag and pulled out her leapfrog game. "Can you play that for a little while?" Lee asked. Clementine smiled and nodded. She then turned on the device and started to play a variety of spelling games. The volume was loud enough for her to hear, while quiet enough so that it wouldn't disturb the rest of the group. "What's going on?" Wyatt asked as he walked up to Lee. "There's a train block in the road. Kenny wants us to investigate." "Hey," Lee said. "Sounds cool. Let's go check it out," Wyatt said. He then headed out of the RV, with Lee following close behind. Once they were outside, they went up to Kenny, who was inspecting the train. "Is there a way around?" Wyatt asked. On foot, maybe, but we really can't do that now, Kenny said. Lee then looked around the surrounding bush and said, all this bush should stop anything from sneaking up on us. Good point. We should let the kids get out here and have a chance to run around and play, Wyatt said. Yeah, sounds good. Go ahead and round up everyone from inside the RV, Kenny said. Lee and Wyatt nodded. They went inside to see if everyone was awake. All right, I think we're okay out here, Wyatt said. Brush should stop anything from sneaking up on us. Yeah, Duck exclaimed. He then squeezed past the two adults. Lee and Wyatt separated they allowed the group members to walk out of the RV. Bud then went up to Lee and nodded. Do you think anyone will listen to me after I killed someone out of vengeance? Bud asked. I don't know about everyone else, but I will follow you, Lee said. We're family, Bud. Nothing is going to change that, Lee said. I'll follow you too. You had every reason to throw me out when I showed up, but you didn't. If anything, you helped me. I just hope I could find Eddie someday, Wyatt said. Bud nodded and said, thanks. He walked out of the RV, followed by Wyatt. Lee still looked over and noticed that Clementine remained completely still. She still had the pacifier in her mouth and her game wasn't on, but more than likely she turned it off. Hey, Sweet Pea, what's the mad? Lee then stopped mid-sentence when he got a whiff of the foul odor. Oh, never mind. I think I know what's wrong. He went over and grabbed a changing mat, a new diaper, and baby wipes from her bag. He laid out the supplies before he picked her up, placed her on the changing mat, and started to push the dress and sweatshirt up and pull the tights down. Bud's sad. Carly gone, Clementine said. Yeah, Bud will get better. And Carly's in heaven now, Sweet Pea, Lee said, as he started to change the diaper on the toddler. Clementine's frown deepened and asked, Is Mommy and Daddy in heaven? Is that why they not find me? I don't know, honey. I'm afraid your guess is just as good as mine, Lee said, as he finished wiping her off and started to place the new diaper on. You gotta keep that in mind that they're pretty far from where we're at. Perhaps they're okay, and they're just having a hard time getting back home. The answer must have satisfied Clementine. She nodded her head and said, okay. Lee finished changed the diaper and helped the toddler to her feet. There we go, all clean, Lee said. He then placed the supplies back into her bag, and then he helped her up. Lee put her game, wipes, and changing mats back into the bag, while the toddler had her arms up to gesture Lee to carry her. Give me 1 sec, Lee said. He put the bag down and leaned forward, and then picked up the girl. She cuddled him into him while he was walking down the steps. Once Lee got outside, he noticed Duck was running around with Danielle chasing him. Down, Clementine said. Lee chuckled before he placed the girl down on the ground. She scampered over and chased after Duck as well. Lee then walked over and sat down next to Vince. Yesterday was pretty rough, Vince said. Man, you could say that again. First time meeting you guys, I get to see 2 people killed, Russell said. We're normally not like that, Lee said. We're usually okay in a group. I hope so. I also don't want to work with another group, like Steve's, Russell said. What was Steve like? Vince asked. Well, he kept us safe from the beginning, but everyone else was dead to him. He kept saying that 7 was a lucky number, and as long as there were 7 of us, we'd be okay. Everyone else was killed and stripped of supplies, Russell said. Damn, Lee muttered. So what made you leave? Vince asked. Russell shook his head and said, Everything that made me want to leave. I don't want to live a life like that, but I knew I wasn't strong enough to leave. It took me a while, but eventually I got the confidence and skills to survive, and that's when I left. Vince nodded his head and said, Well, we're glad to have you with us. Thanks. I'm glad to be here, Russell said. I'm glad I actually found some decent people. Where were you heading before we met up with you? Vince asked. Statesboro, Russell said. I've got some family there. If they're alive. Vince hummed and said, That's tough. I'm afraid we're heading to Savannah. At least the way Kenny's talking, we are. Well, that puts the bind on me. I was hoping to go there. I don't want to leave you guys, but I have to go and find my family, Russell said. I don't want to send you back out there on your own, Vince said. I'll go with him, Wyatt said. 2 men and a teenager looked to Wyatt. You sure? Vince asked. Yeah, I think Eddie's alive, and if he is, I'll find him in this area, Wyatt said. We may never see each other again. Are you sure you want to do that? Lee asked. Don't worry. I think we're all strong enough to keep going for the next couple years, Wyatt said. Suddenly they jumped when they heard the train start up. Holy shit, we're golden, Kenny exclaimed as he walked up to Bud. Well, how the hell did you do that? They got the train started, Vince said. We ride in it? Danielle's voice was heard. The men then looked around and looked at the two toddlers. Maybe, Vince said. That'll be fun if we can, Clementine said. We'll have to wait and see. I'm not sure if it's ready to go, Lee said. Now, if we do go on the train, you girls will have to be very careful. We'll be moving very fast, and trains can be dangerous. We will, Clementine said. Lee heard footsteps from behind him. He figured it was Bud, but he was surprised when he heard an older, gruffer voice. Howdy, y'all. Lee then jumped and then to the older man. His clothes were in tatters and appears to be old. He wore a yellow jacket, purple shirt, black jeans, and black shoes. It seemed like he hadn't shaved in a while, and his hair was gray and shaggy. The man chuckled and said, I was hoping to scare the pants out of you. He teased with a sense of humor, which was good. Well, yeah, you succeeded, Lee said. I'm Lee. Chuck. Charles, if you're fancy, the man said. Nice to meet you. I'm Vince, Vince said. And these two are Danielle and Clementine. Chuck smiled at the two and said, Been a while since I've seen a couple of babies. Hi, Clementine said with a smile. Hello, Danielle said. She also had a smile aimed at the man. Hi, Chuck said. You know, I think I have some candy with me, girls, if your daddies are all right with it. Yeah, we're all right with it, but neither of us are fathers to them, Vince said. Yay! The two girls cheered. Chuck chuckled as he gave the girls some candy. He also gave Duck some candy. Lee picked up Clementine and sat her on his lap as she enjoyed the candy. Vince did the same with Danielle. Thank you, Lee said. Of course. Chuck said. I'll be back, Chuck said. I see someone else who might be scared. Lee then turned around to see his younger brother walked over into the boxcar. Scare him good, Lee said. Will do, Chuck said, before he walked out of inside the boxcar. Lee chuckled and then he said, Ed, you don't see many people like that nowadays. Yes, I miss seeing people like that. Anymore when you see more people, you expect the worst, Katja said. These times are trying times, but maybe one of these days we'll find somewhere to call home, Vince said. Yeah, I hope so, Katja said. Clementine finished a candy bar and got off Lee's lap. I play, the girl said. Okay, don't go too far, Lee said. Clementine nodded while Danielle also got off of Vince's lap. The two played a game of tag with each other before Duck joined in. Good thing they can exhaust themselves, Lee said. Yeah, I'm going to miss them, Wyatt said. I can go on my own if you want to stay with your group, Russell said. Wyatt shook his head and said, Nah, I gotta get back on track. I got to go find Eddie. After we head to Statesboro, and if we find Eddie, we'll try and find you guys. Okay, we'll do the same if Savannah's a bust, Vince said. Bud, you met Chuck, Clementine exclaimed as she ran up to Bud. Yeah, I did, Bud said. He picked up the toddler. He gave us candy, Clementine said. Bud then looked at the head in confirmation. Welcome, Bud said. Thank you, Chuck said with a nod. You met Kenny? Bud asked. Sure did. Man shares my love on the road, Chuck said. Hey, Bud, we loose? Kenny asked as he climbed down from the train. Yeah, we're good to go, Bud said. He placed Clementine on the ground and the toddler went to Lee. Lee picked her up and placed her on his lap again. All right, we need to grab everything from the RV and get a move on, Kenny said. Yeah, about that, Wyatt said. Russell wants to go to Statesboro and, well, I want to stick around to find Eddie. So wait, you're leaving us? Kenny inquired. It's not like that, Wyatt said. We can't force them to go, Vince said. They could take some of our supplies and the RV. We get the train and most of the supplies. I think that's fair. Kenny grumbled and said, Fine. He shook his head and then went back to the train. Ignore him. You're doing the right thing. He's just being difficult, Katja said. All right, Vince, Lee, can you guys help get everything together? Bud asked. Sure, Lee said. We're on it, Vince said. The two men later went into the RV and got most of the remaining supplies. They did leave Russell and Wyatt enough to get them started towards Statesboro. They left some food, water, medicine, tools, gasoline, a couple of guns, some ammunition, and some other miscellaneous supplies. "All right, you're set," Vince said, as they left the RV. "Good luck." "Thanks, you too," Wyatt said. He and Russell went off to the cab of the RV, while Vince and Lee picked up Danielle and Clementine and got on the train. Once they were on, the train started to move forward. It started off slow, but it eventually took off.